So after I completed and reviewed the first game of the Far Cry series, which I talked about a couple of weeks ago on my channel, I was hoping to have a more pleasurable and memorable experience with the second Far Cry game. And after 25 hours in Far Cry 2, I can say that my experience was kinda mixed, to be honest. That's a good way to describe my experience with Far Cry 2. So in today's video, I want to talk about the second adaptation of a Far Cry game from 2008 and how it's holding up 15 years after its release. So right after starting the game, the first thing you do is you wait around 15 minutes because you're on a taxi drive where the driver is taking you somewhere and telling you a little bit about the country and the situation in there. And already in the first hour, I unfortunately realized that even though this game is 4 years older than the first one, it's still full of bugs, unfortunately. You know, like in the first couple of minutes, there were only funny bugs, like the NPCs just jumping around or teleporting themselves all the time. But later on, I experienced some really annoying bugs. For example, I wasn't able to pick up an object that was necessary to continue the story. Like every time I was approaching the object to take it, the game started to kick me 2 meters back. And thus I needed around 2 minutes to pick up an object in order to get on with the storyline. And the same thing is with the NPCs you talk to sometimes. Like they just teleport themselves and start speaking their paragraphs all over again for like 5 minutes straight. So I was literally standing in front of a character one time and he was re-saying his sentence around 10-15 times all over again. But to be fair, as the game went on, I started to notice less and less bugs. But now the story of the game is, well, kind of boring in my opinion. I mean, Far Cry isn't really known to be a masterpiece when it comes to the story, but this one was one of the most forgettable stories that I have played in recent years. I mean, the only real memorable character is the antagonist of the game, the Jackal, who I still think might be the protagonist of the first game, Jack Craver, because he was the only one who gave us some plot twists. But the protagonist, which actually isn't a real person, you can decide which protagonist you're going to play, has no depth whatsoever. You don't know why he's there, what his real intentions are, you only know that he has to kill the Jackal and that's it. And all the other characters as well, they are very forgettable, and in my opinion other Far Cry games have done way better jobs when it comes to the story and the characters. Now when it comes to the open world, I think that we have a lot good things to say here. Like the open world is based somewhere in Africa, like we don't know exactly where, they didn't mention it and we don't even know if it's a real place or not. But the atmosphere is really good. You know, for a game that was released in 2008, I think they made a really good job with this open world that especially is as big as this one. Obviously because of that, the quality of the open world suffers, because you have a lot of things that kind of look the same. You don't have much locations that kind of stand out and that you remember. And personally, I still prefer the open world from the first game. But all in all, I think the safari-like setting especially is very good for an open world. And I kind of hope that we'll see a newer Far Cry based in a safari like that, because the potential is definitely there. Now a weird thing that I found was kind of the quest system in the game. So you know, the game starts off quite normal, you have your main quest, you're introduced into the world, some tasks that you have to do. But at some point, once you complete a certain amount of quests in the main story, you have to complete things on the map and you have to help the two parties. You know, you have the UFLL and the APR that are fighting against one another, and you have to help them with certain things. But essentially, what you're doing is you're doing the same thing that the Jackal is doing in the game. Because what the Jackal is doing is he's supplying both parties with armor and weapons, so you're being sent there to kill him, but kind of you're doing the same thing. So you know, that was kind of weird, but I really liked the thought of kind of giving the player the freedom to explore the world, do certain things, and to, you know, learn more about the world, the characters, and how everything works before being able to continue with the main story. And essentially, when you do this, you'll also very quickly realize that the game is kind of trying its best to kill you. Like, that's what I felt like while I was playing the game oftentimes, because, you know, while I was exploring different locations or different houses, you don't have a couple of minutes of peace, because when you approach any location there is, like any place that kind of looks interesting or that has some buildings in it, you'll have 3,000 enemies just shooting at you with the craziest aimbots, because you will die within seconds in this game. Like, it's not as bad as it is in Far Cry 1, where I literally died 50 plus times, but still you have to play around corners, you have to kill the enemies very fast, because otherwise you'll be dead in 3 seconds. And oftentimes when you die, it's not that you have to reload everything, oftentimes you die and one of your buddies that you met early in the game will help you, will revive you, and will put you back on your feet. But most of the time, when they were reviving me, I died 20 seconds later, because it feels like the enemies literally have a wall hack, they know where you are. That's also why stealth is essentially non-existent in the game, unfortunately. Like, there were several times where I tried to sneak up on a guard or on an enemy, and I tried to take him down somehow, but apparently the stealth component in Far Cry was added in Far Cry 3. So just like the first Far Cry game, this one is also more like a first-person shooter. And when it comes to the weapons, you know, they tried to make it, well, how do I say it, as realistic as possible. Because, you know, the gunplay and the gameplay in general, because you have things like a physical map, for example, or your weapons will get jammed very often, and you will have to wait a couple of seconds until the weapon is unjammed, and then you'll be able to continue shooting. And you know, that's realistic and stuff, it's all good, but it kind of happens in the worst moments possible most of the times. Because while I was shooting at an enemy, suddenly my gun started to jam itself, and I had to run behind the next stone or behind the next tree in order to get cover. But all in all, I have to say that the gunplay is very, very satisfying in the game. And you know, it's 15 years old, but in my opinion they made a great job with the gunplay and the guns in general. And well, as I said, all of that jamming and that realism, I think it's kind of subjective if you like it. Like, for me, I wouldn't miss it if it was there, but you know, it is what it is. So all in all, would I recommend Far Cry 2 15 years after its release? And you know, here my honest answer has to be no, unfortunately. Look, if you're like me and you just want to play every Far Cry game just for the sakes of it, then you know, you will have some fun moments during the game, and it definitely will be a fun experience at times. But in my opinion, if you're a casual gamer just trying to find a new game, there are definitely better options out there. And you know, even though I believe Far Cry 2 is a good game in general, I think it has a lot of flaws that, especially for modern gamers nowadays, and you know, especially when you think about it, how picky modern gamers are nowadays, I think you should probably focus on something else and buy something else instead that will give you a better experience than this game. But still, in my 25 hours, I did have some fun. A lot of my hours spent in the game were really boring because it started to get really repetitive after a time. But you have to remember that this game is from 2008. So you know, you can be expecting a fully fleshed out 10 out of 10 game. But still, if you're a casual gamer looking for a new game, I wouldn't recommend Far Cry 2. You know, you won't have any disadvantage if you want to play another Far Cry game, because you know, every Far Cry game can be played on its own. So that's why I would not recommend Far Cry to the normal casual gamer. But guys, I hope you can give me your opinion on Far Cry 2 in the comments, whether you liked it more and you see it differently than I do. As I said, this is my subjective opinion of the game, and I hope you will give me your opinion down in the comments. Alright guys, that was it from me. I hope you have an amazing day, and I'll see you in the next one.